Winning Plays podcast is back and the Celtics schedule is out. Mark your calendars through, should we say June, Souichi Terada? Is that a little too ambitious on that part?
Well, so somebody tweeted at me about the schedule and I was like, let's chill on June. We at least know concrete through April and then we'll go from there. Like, let's not look too far ahead. Plus, with June's schedule, like you never that comes out series by series, so we don't know. It's not concrete until we know.
All fair. We're not gonna be overly ambitious here on the Winning Plays pod. My name is Brian Robb. That voice here, it is Souichi Terada of Mass Live. Make sure you're following him on Twitter at SOUICHI Terada TRADA. And Souichi, I know you were really chomping at the bit for this. You're not even a rookie on the beat. This is going to be your third year coming up here, but you know the importance of schedule day of being like this is life for the next 6 to 8 months. And Celtics fans, I imagine this is just as much for them this year this is going to be must-see TV year round now that you have a bona fide contender in place that has made some upgrades here. And we have the full docket here, starting off the NBA season period, opening night against Philly at the Garden.
Yeah, it's I didn't realize. I don't know. I came from a college beat, so those schedules are pretty much already out years in advance.
Right.
College football, they schedule out literally a decade in advance or something crazy. So with the NBA though, it's so nice. And like you said, how I don't know, 37 national TV games or something insane. With a contender, there just wasn't as much buzz I think even last year, just because it was okay, the schedule's out, that's cool. Whereas this year it's you got the Bucks on Christmas Day, you got 76ers opening night, the finals rematch with the Warriors, when will the Nets come in if they do have KD and Kyrie, you got, and which games are the Miami games, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot more to look forward to, I think. And I think, you could kind of feel the excitement. It was just a scheduled release day. I saw other NBA beat writers releasing it, and the fans were interacting with it. But I think the Celtics fans, you were just going, okay, yeah, all right. Everyone's feeling it. Everyone's already excited. I don't know about you, B-Rob. I don't want the season to start ASAP, but I am excited to see. Yeah, I want the off season a little bit more, obviously. Post finals, but that ate up a lot of our summer. So
as far as I'm concerned, they can just cut out the preseason entirely for us. So it's let's get to October 18th. Unfortunately, it's not going to work like that. But yeah, it's weird to see. Oh yeah, they play their first preseason game October 2nd. So I feel like training camp has to start pretty soon before that, and it's getting a little too close. But honestly, it is exciting in terms of what is coming up ahead for this year. And so what's well, I'll just put it this. Let's come out with just takeaways for biggest, easiest month, toughest month, things that stuck out to you the most. I guess just looking at this whole schedule, what kind of stuck out to you first and foremost here when you just looked at the full 82 year Souichi?
Yeah, the road trips are kind of weird. The December road trip, the 6-game one, is weird. You're going to Brooklyn, Toronto, then Phoenix. No, the schedule makers kind of made that a little bit weird. Then you got another 6-game road trip in March and everything like that. And then the December November schedule is weird because you got that 6-game homestand. I want to say, right? Yeah, 6-game homestand, or I think. Sorry, let me count this real quick. 5-game homestand, then 6-game road trip, and you got a 7-game homestand. So. One thing I am kind of curious about is that January, just because you have, I believe it's 10 road games in that month and only 5 home games. So it's just kind of the way it's kind of constructed. Obviously, it's an NBA schedule. So you look at it and you're oh, that's a lot of games in a month. And it's yeah, that's just what the NBA schedule is. But I'm kind of curious to see how that January just feels, And I think you that's one of those months where you have the Warriors at home, you have the Lakers at home. So there's a lot of marquee games. But I circle that month where I'm okay. I think that those are some of the trips where, maybe Horford doesn't play, or maybe Gallo doesn't play, maybe Brogdon, sits out on the back-to-back. So overall, though, I think those are the ones that immediately stuck out to me when I first saw it. I'm ooh, those road trips are weird. They're very condensed in a lot of ways. So, but if the road trips are condensed, that means your home games are also condensed. So you're pretty much not traveling. The second half of December, which is nice. The home Christmas game, I'm very happy with. I remember I was in Milwaukee for Christmas last month as COVID was raging on. It was really weird. I was should I even be here right now? What am I doing here on Christmas? So I'll take that home Christmas game all day in Boston.
Yeah, you really highlighted the craziest stretch here of the home. It's actually, so it's I don't think I've ever seen this on an NBA schedule period, from a 6-game homestand that around Thanksgiving into a 6-game road trip and then into a 7-game homestand. So it's like the Celtics generally do not have very long homestands. It's usually like 3 games, and that makes sense because they have to split the building with the Bruins, and you have to kind of orchestrate things around their schedule because they are the primary tenant there. But to do that, to have that, I mean, do you feel like that's like a nice thing for the players, or do you feel like they would want to? Because when you have 13 home dates in like a 4-week stretch, that means you're on the road for a lot of the rest of the year. So it's like, I guess it's a catch-22 from that. So I'm curious to hear like if the players were excited to see that, or if they're like, ooh, that's like, that means it's going to be rough for a lot of the rest of the year.
I think the fact that there's so many road games in January sucks the most, just because like I personally felt like last year was my first full year, right, B-Rob? Like, I personally felt this like the 10 games before the All-Star break. I was like, all right, let's like it was like the dog into the season. Like I don't think the fans were as excited, even though the Celtics had their big turnaround. But like it was definitely the dog days. Like the interest kind of waned off, right before the All-Star break and everything. So I think that's where it probably kind of sucks. Like you're already like 3 months into the season, then you have to go on the road so much in January. Like I think that's where you're kind of like, okay, that sucks. So that's how I kind of feel about it. I don't know how you feel about it, B-Rob. The second half of the schedule, the thing is too, like I remember last December, like you looked at the schedule and then I kind of expected the Celtics to falter to start off just because like one, like I remember last year, the December had the big road trip, but you were also playing like really good teams. So like I kind of circled December. I'm like, okay, if they can like kind of like just like manage this month, it'll be fine. Whereas like this month, like you have the road trip, but like the games are pretty easy. Like you get Orlando in 2 straight home games. Like Minnesota will be kind of interesting, but like you get the Pacers, the Rockets in the month of December. Like
you make up for
not
those.
that many.
Sure.
Yeah, like it's just like not as like tough of like an opponent. Obviously we don't know what these teams will look like, but you can probably bet the Pacers and Rockets are going to be very good. So I think that's the biggest thing. Like at least you can take some nights off with a little bit easier games, right? Because I just felt like a lot of the tough games were kind of jam packed. And then when they did make their run like that came partly because the schedule got a little bit easier. So I think you feel pretty good about it. But I just look at that January and I think it's just going to be a grind just because 10 road games, I think in a month compared to 5 home games is especially with 2 of those games, like those are going to be ABC, Warriors and Lakers, like it's going to be extra attention, extra juice. And then on top of the road games, like that's a lot to ask for from a team. And I think that's when, Ime is probably going to go dip a little deeper into the bench, and you might see some of the deeper bench guys get a little bit more run just because I'm sure, there'll be nicks and bruises there by the time of that season too.
Yeah, there's no question that fortifying the depth standpoint this year was a clear priority, given the additions they made and now how they're kind of filling out the roster with guys that can hopefully give them something in a pinch as opposed to developmental projects, which was most of the bench at the end of last year. Or most of the end of the bench at the end of last year. So that certainly, I agree. Like that's definitely going to come into play in that stretch where you have, I mean, who knows? They'll probably like leave Al Horford home for one of these trips and be like, hey, go put your feet up for a week or something like that. Allie, like, you don't have the extra like 3 months of rest like you did last year. But between Brogdon, we all know his injury history. And then, Tatum, Smart, Brown, they all carried like a pretty incredible minutes load throughout that grind of last season, and that clearly came back to bite them in some way in the finals with how they played in after game 1. So I agree that seeing how that's going to look there too. But I don't know, like this first trip in December though, Brooklyn, Toronto on a back-to-back, Phoenix, Golden State, Clippers, Lakers. If Durant is still in Brooklyn there, that is probably the toughest trip that any team in the NBA will have this season. Like that's like 5 legit teams, and then the Lakers on top of that were
the Lakers,
right? The Lakers. Yeah. So at the end of the trip, no less. So that's going to be a bear.
Yeah, and then I it's like weird too, just because you have that East Coast back to back, and then you fly directly to Phoenix. Like you have the back to back, then you have to fly to Phoenix, and there's only 1 day break.
Right.
Like that. Like on top of that sucks. And then you played. We don't know what the KD situation, especially with the Celtics, right? But like the Lakers game is the tail end of the 6-game road trip, and it's also back to back. So it's like if they go like 3-3 on that road trip, I'll be very impressed. I guess we don't know what the Nets will look like. The Nets could be horrible, but I think that's just one of those road trips where you're like, yeah, sure, you're a contender and everything, but you also, and like you mentioned, like there are 2 back-to-backs in that 6-game road trip. So it's just, that one's just weird, man. I don't think I've ever seen that in terms of like, I feel like it's pretty straightforward. Like you get maybe an extra day to like go out west, you get an extra day to come back from out west, but the NBA kind of, that one's going to be a little bit much, but it'll be, I think pretty much all these games are going to be nationally televised. Like Celtics Warriors is going to be, Celtics Lakers always is, like Celtics Clippers is going to be really interesting. So we'll see, I guess. I don't know. But like I mentioned earlier, after that road trip, you get Orlando, 2 straight games at home. You get Indiana, you get Minnesota, and then you go into the Christmas Day game. So it's not, it's tough, but it could be worse, I guess. And it could be, maybe the Bucks twice, or maybe you get the Heat, or maybe you even get like a middle playoff team like the Bulls. So
yeah, it's really going to be something where you hope that both sides would even out over the course of times there. But that's one where if the team went to the scheduling committee and was like, hey, what are you trying to do? But here's the other thing: they have another 6-game road trip, and their second one is even longer than this one, Souichi. The strength of the opposition is not nearly as bad in March here, but talk about crisscrossing the country here. Starting March 11th, you go from Atlanta to Houston, up to Minnesota, and then you go down the coast, Portland, Utah, and then you have to wait 2 more days on the West Coast to play in Sacramento before coming back. So
that one's weird.
That's another one in terms of like, again, a lot of those teams won't necessarily be that good, so that should be a lot less tough on them there. But that's a pretty rough trip, especially with at the 70-game mark of the season.
Yeah, exactly. And once again, you got that Portland, Utah back to back. I think you'll see some players not even making that trip, honestly. And nice thing too, like the 2 home games that you get coming back from that is going to be Indiana, the Pacers, and the Spurs. So luckily, it won't be that difficult. I was actually a little bit surprised, B-Rob. Like you have kind of like a mix. I think it's more of a mix this year for like first glance, it's only been a day since it came out, and we don't know what these teams are going to look like, right? Like we thought Portland would be decent last year, et cetera, et cetera. I think you get more of a mix of like, you kind of like flip flop between like these really competitive games and like these kind of like bottom feeder teams. I think that's a lot better too. Cause like I mentioned, like December last year, like I think in December last year was like almost every game they played was against like a playoff team from the year before. Like I said, like Portland wasn't that good. The Clippers weren't the Clippers because Kawhi wasn't playing, et cetera, et cetera. But like, those are like, there was an objectively tough schedule, whereas this time you're kind of flip-flopping. So at least you'll have a little bit of a break, I think. And that's when, maybe you play Pritchard like 25 minutes against, the Trailblazers one game, and then maybe you go all out against, the Bucks or whoever it may be. So, I think the balance is a lot better. It's too early to say what these teams will look like, but at least I like the balance a little bit more compared to last year.
Yeah, I think it's a good point about you on that. I think that will help them just plan things out a little better, and then like from the minute standpoint, really even things out there. But I want to get into like most anticipated matchups, and we'll get to that in a second. First, we're going to hear from our sponsor here, LinkedIn Talent Solutions, where as you gear up for the fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire in all cylinders. And LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. I know personally, I've been on LinkedIn for years. It has helped lead to a couple of jobs over the years, and I've been able to connect with and network with tons of people on there over time. So it's a great place to get set up on. So you can create a free job post on there in minutes to reach your network and beyond on the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. So you can add your job and the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring, so your network can help you find the right people to hire on there. It's simple tools. You can use screening questions, make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. So here's what you can do. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find candidates you want to talk to. Nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn every week. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/winning. That's linkedin.com/winning to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Souichi, I want to hear your top 3 matchups of the season on here. And don't go obvious on me. We know the clear-cut ones. I'm gonna Like you can only pick the Warriors once here, but give me one high profile one, and give me kind of at least one under the radar one that you're looking forward to seeing, whether it's at the Garden or on the road, some team that whether you're intrigued by what they did this offseason or just a place you want to go to. You can go however you want to handle this. What be three you're looking forward to here?
One I'm looking forward to is that road game November 7th against the Grizzlies. I think that's going to be because, right, like they played a decent game against the Grizzlies last year. They played them pretty well at home, but then the last game of the season, like it didn't matter for the Grizzlies. Like they were already locked in. And, you know, like if you're there in person, like media gets courtside seats, and like seeing Ja courtside, I bet would be very cool, very exciting. I'm sure that'll get a lot of attention. So that one, I'm kind of curious to see how Atlanta looks. Like,
yeah,
Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. That's like the next week after, so I'm not trying to front load this or anything. But those Atlanta games, they also play on the last game of the regular season. We'll see if that will end up mattering, like I just said. But I'm very curious to see Atlanta. And then Dallas, like they're fresh off a conference finals run. I think Luka is just going to get better. And I love watching Luka play. Like I just think it's so much fun. And you know, like when the Celtics looked invincible, you know, like the Mavericks and the Celtics had a very similar season last year.
They always play great games too.
Yeah.
They play incredible games every single time, it seems like.
I don't know about the ones that in Dallas, like I don't know.
I mean, like just dramatic games, like two straight Luka game-winning threes in Dallas. And then the one in Boston was like the KG retirement day. And that was a crazy back and forth game too that Dallas pulled out down the stretch there. But I agree. I think Dallas is a sneaky. If you want to go to a Celtics game and not pay like top dollar like you would against like the Lakers or the Warriors, get a Mavericks game, because that's one where I think for the entertainment factor, you're guaranteed good stuff there.
Yeah, I love watching Luka play. And I guess just to throw in one more is definitely Denver. I love watching Luka and Jokic play. Like those are some of my favorite players, I think. And you know, I don't know, like they smashed. I remember last March they smashed the Nuggets, but I just think with Jamal Murray being back and hopefully MPJ's healthy, though that doesn't seem like a guarantee. Like I think the Nuggets will look a lot more interesting next year too.
I like it. Yeah, having Jamal Murray back is going to be really fascinating to see how those parts mix together there. You brought up a good point. I mean, you brought up Atlanta to end the season. The end of the season here for the Celtics is very sneaky interesting because they close out the last week with Philly, Toronto, 2 in a row at home, and Atlanta. Those are 4 teams that probably will be fighting for playoff positioning in what is a pretty crowded Eastern Conference. So this will be kudos to the schedule makers there to like at least add an extra layer of intrigue. And I think the good news here for the Celtics too is that like they have 3 days off to start April there. So they won't necessarily be, dying for rest at that point. So they could, if they're playing for seeding at that point, I expect them to go hard in all those games.
And the week before too, they have Milwaukee on the road. So those are a lot of Eastern Conference teams who realistically, like they might be like 3 or 4, at most 3 or 4 games apart. So
yeah, it's you just rarely see that from that, at that point in the year over time. It's usually against a Western Conference team or just a couple teams that are taking at that point. I think it's pretty guaranteed to say, 5 of those last 6 opponents are going to be teams that are going to be in the thick of things so far. For me, another just general takeaway here is the Celtics really should be getting off to a strong start in the season based on this schedule. I mean, you open up with Philly and Miami, and that's, you could easily split that or go 0-2. And if you crap the bed against Philly in the opener at home. But then after that, there's really no top tier opponents for your next 2 weeks until you play like the Memphis game you mentioned, but they'll either catch a break there because Jaren Jackson Jr. is still going to be out after ongoing, he went that surgery. And you do have Denver at home that week, but by and large, the November schedule is pretty easy compared to when you look at the level of opponents. And the same goes for October after those first 2. You got Orlando, Chicago, Cleveland, Washington at home. So to make up for, to give themselves a little bit of leeway on that West Coast trip, like Ime Udoka should be like, hey, listen, we need to be coming out here, building up, 15-5, 14-6 type start here to give ourselves a rung up. And so we're not playing, catch up for the last half of the season like they did last year.
Yeah, I just think it'd be obviously good for seeding, but I just think it's better for the vibes if the defending Eastern Conference champ just starts off strong and makes a couple statement games. I think the team will realize that too, especially like you mentioned the road trip and everything. But I think the biggest thing too is like if you look at like the November schedule, like you'll see playoff teams on there, like right Memphis. Who knows what they'll look like? Like Cleveland's a decent team, but they're not like a top tier team. They're still pretty young. Chicago, like realistically, like who knows what Chicago will look like, right? Like they were the number one seed for a bit, but that felt like their peak, honestly. Like those players aren't getting any younger with with DeMar and who knows what they'll look like and everything. But I don't know. Like I just think it's for all the right reasons, I think it's good to start off strong. But like it's just like I think it's good to start off strong. Then you can kind of look at like the middle parts of the season and be like, okay, this is when we can sneak in a rest day for these guys. Maybe we can play Tatum like 30 minutes a game instead of 36 minutes a game and stuff like that. And maybe we can see, maybe the Celtics can see what Peyton Pritchard is about, like maybe what he can do in his third year. Maybe you give Grant Williams a little bit more run, like he's still pretty young. So I think the middle parts of the season too is when you can really dabble with a lot of like experimental stuff. But like you said, B-Rob, like the schedule looks good for them, and I just think a 15-5 start would just be great for the vibes. Like the 18-21 start last year after they lost on the buzzer beater, the RJ Barrett buzzer beater to the Knicks. Like it'll never get to that point, right? Like they've proven that they're contenders, but it's just like you just don't want to like mess with something like that. Like I know you're like contenders and everything. I know you're expected to make a deep playoff run, but it's just good for the vibes if you go 15-5, like you said.
Yeah, it'll I think really help change the way Ime Udoka manages games, and like you said, give those guys the opportunities in these games. And I mean, I'm just curious to see how he's going to handle it. I mean, even on a regular night where everyone's got equal rest, is Ime going to go 10 deep? Is Peyton Pritchard going to be playing every night, or is he going to be more of like, okay, we want to play and we want to play more than 5 minutes, so let's wait for those nights where someone's got a night off, or we're playing a lesser opponent, so we can give him more run at it in the game regardless. And all that stuff will kind of come into play more in that first stretch of the season where they'll have chances to tinker a bit more given the opponents on the schedule.
Oh.
What do you think? Any closing thoughts on the schedule here? We don't want to hammer this to death here, but I feel like it is a pretty fascinating look. Big picture wise, I actually think the schedule, sometimes an easier schedule will help you. I mean, still, you're playing the same teams regardless, but how it aligns might help you or help you. You had a nice piece on Mass Live just looking at, the over under win total for the season is 54.5, according to our sponsor on Bet Online. And the question is for me, and for you, does this schedule help them get there? Or does it actually hurt them based on a couple of the volumes of these trips and, that grind of a schedule in January?
I think it probably, if anything, if I had gun to my head, I would probably say it hurts them a little bit. I don't know. I just think 10 games in January when you just don't have the same juice, right? Those are going to be tough. And then you got those weird 6-game road trips, and it's just, the travel aspect I think is very I don't know, personally, after traveling a lot my first season, I just think that's a very underrated part of the league, just because you're traveling thousands and thousands and thousands of miles during the season, and I just can bog you down. But in terms of closing thoughts, I just think realistically, I've been telling all my friends this, the Celtics are going to sleepwalk probably to 50 wins, right? That's just, this roster is just too good. I think barring injuries,
right,
you just never know with that. But as long as they're reasonably healthy, as long as Robb plays 55, 60 games, Al plays 50 games, 60 games, keep them conservative. As long as there isn't any major injury to one of the major players, a Jalen or Jason or Marcus, I think this is a team that should sleepwalk to 50 games. Who knows what seeding wise that'll be. I think if you win, if they hit the over 55 wins, I think that's good enough for first in the East realistically. Especially as a crowded East, I just think the top Eastern teams are just going to cannibalize each other all season. So I think you got to consider that too, right? The Raptors are going to be really spicy. The Sixers are going to be, with a training camp with James, who knows what Harden looks like. With Sixers, Heat, who knows what the Nets will look like. All those teams are going to be vying for the top of the East, and as a result, I just don't think there's going to be as many wins to go around as past Eastern conferences, which were maybe a little bit more down. So, but overall, I don't know. I just think the schedule is obviously interesting. Like I want to know what I'm gonna do in like mid-January, just if my friends have plans or anything like that. But at the end of the day, like these are contenders. Like they shouldn't. I doubt they will, and they won't. But they shouldn't take the regular season as hard. They'll go all in as even last year. Like this is a contender. Like just prioritize for the playoffs. I think that's what the goal should be for the next 82 games. Just make another finals run, get banner number 18. Like that's at this point, like that's what the Celtics should aim for, just because they are contenders.
Yeah, and I'm with you in terms of I don't think this schedule helps them at all in terms of getting to that 54 and a half. And like you said, it's going to be wins. I think anyone getting to that mark at the 54 and a half mark for wins it's going to be rough in the East because, like you said, there's just not many easy wins to come by, even when you go further down the conference beyond the teams you mentioned. Just not a lot of teams just taking it at this point, at least to start the year. So that's going to be fascinating to keep an eye on. We're going to wrap up in a minutes here because we're not allowed to contractually do any podcasts without talking about Kevin Durant at this point of the calendar. But all right, Souichi, we haven't talked about this on the pod since Summer League, I believe. And so we've had a lot of rumblings on the Durant front in this month. It feels like it's been like 3 months, to be honest, based on the number of leaks that have come out here.
Mm-hmm.
The latest seems to be, okay, the Nets are really just hoping they can run things back here, which makes a ton of sense. Of course they want to do that. Like they haven't seen this team composed with Ben Simmons yet. They're obviously not getting the Durant offers they want regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question to you is, do you think that's realistically going to work? Or do you think Durant makes this thing ugly and kind of puts their feet to the fire more a la what Ben Simmons did in Philly last year?
I think it's far more likely to get ugly than him just playing it out, just because like dude can show up to training camp. Jimmy Butler showed up to training camp for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and we know what happened there with the legendary moments that came out of those practice reports and everything like that. So I don't know, like I just don't see them running it back just because like these leaks are all strategic. And in terms of the leak that I thought that was kind of interesting was the one about where Durant essentially gave Joe Tsai like the ultimatum of like either pick Steve Nash and Sean Marks or pick me. And then obviously Joe Tsai, he ended up tweeting like, hey, like front office and the coaching staff has my full support. So I just don't see how you can cleanly run it back when Durant basically, like broadcasted to the world, like obviously not publicly per sources and everything, but like,
right. Like I don't want to play for this coach like that. I had a hand in hiring. Like it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's gotta be awkward.
Like, also, like Steve Nash is like, this dude should get way more respect than like he's getting in terms of this, right? Like, dude has won MVPs before. Like he's proven like he's a very good player and he has a good basketball mind and everything. So I just don't see how this runs back cleanly. Like between all of those things, like sure I can see him showing up to training camp, but just like essentially being super chaotic. Yeah, I can see that, but it's just beyond that. Like I just don't see how you can play 82 games and it's just. Right? Like I keep writing about this just because of all these rumors. Like Durant's about to turn 34 years old. He's got 4 years left on his contract. Like, I don't know. Like, I just don't think those are like necessarily good things at this point in his career. Like he's been very injury prone. I think, ever since his last Warriors year and everything after he tore his Achilles, like it's just, dude's getting up there in age. Like how many like great NBA seasons does he have left in his body? Like even last year, like sure, he was very, very good when he saw the court, but like that wasn't necessarily all the time. So I think this will go ugly before. Like I get why the Nets want to do this, like right, like with a healthy Joe Harris, with a healthy Ben Simmons, with an engaged Kyrie, with an engaged KD, like that's still one of the best teams in the league. I just don't think it's gonna happen, which is a shame. Like I think that would be a very fun team to watch. Unfortunately, it's obviously not gonna come to fruition.
Yeah, the Nash part that you hit on there, because it's one thing you say, okay, like the Sean Marks dissension there is under, like, at least it's understandable because like Durant, that's not Durant's guy, and the things that they went with, obviously he was mad in terms of how they handled Kyrie last year with vaccination stuff and keeping him away from the team for the first half of the year, which you wonder if they made a different decision there, whether things would be different now or not. Even though that was a very understandable decision at the time by the team, I think. But with Nash, it's like, okay, you clearly, this was your guy. You pushed out, or Kyrie helped push out Atkinson. You brought in the guy you wanted, And so what did Nash do to turn Durant off to him? Is it more just like, okay, I have to try to sever this relationship to get out of here, and like I have nothing against Nash, but this is how I get out of here sooner, and try to convince the Nets that I'm not going to play for them, is to try to damage this relationship. It's like there are so many angles to this. It's fascinating to see like how when push comes to shove, like, okay, well, like, will both sides just give in and be like, okay, like, Steve, I heard you just said to Kevin, but I'm still the coach here, and or is it just like, okay, this is like a disaster, like someone's gonna want out?
Yeah, poor Steve Nash. Like, he could just be chilling in retirement, but he chose to do this, and I don't even like. Sure, I don't know. It's just when you sign up to coach Kyrie and KD in Brooklyn, like I just simply think you would have expected more like functional like relationships and like a functional organization, but that just has not been the case. And I just feel bad for Steve Nash, man. By all accounts, he seems like a good dude. Just wanted to play some soccer in retirement, but came back to coach. And this is what ends up happening. Poor guy.
It is. If he ever wants, I'd be shocked if he ever wants to coach again after this. Like, it's just like I mean, maybe you want to see this is not on your legacy like this, but it's also just like like you said, like, I did not sign up for this kind of a mess. But that's, again, if you follow Kyrie's career arc, that kind of is, I guess it's not a complete shock that he's, left an organization just like this. And I mean, Durant is a different kind of cat, I guess, on this front too. So I don't know, this is just, we're getting close. It's like training camp is about a month away here. So, it's the staring match is going to continue. The leaks are going to continue, and we're going to be, waiting for some real basketball to start as we hope there's something else to write about.
Well, let's first enjoy the off season, Rob.
It's true. It's not there. We still have another month. We have another month.
Celtics be right. It's we deserve that after a very long finals run.
Delayed start to training camp, hopefully. All right. Make sure you're following Souichi on Twitter at Souichi Terada on there, and check out all the stuff on Mass Live as well. Rate, review, subscribe to the Winning Plays Pod. We'll be continuing to getting you guys ready for the start of next season as we get closer to training camp. And I don't know, there's still a couple roster spots open, Souichi, so we could have some fresh signing or two to talk about in the next. The 15-man roster battle will be fun for training camp. That will be a fun angle for us.
Yeah, we'll see how training camp goes first, or who's still there. Honestly,
right? True. We'll see. A lot of answers. Everything's up in the air. So we'll be writing that down as we get closer here. And yep, that's it for us. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys next week.